The Last of Us is full of so many wonderful, great and awesome moments, and it's hard to pick a top 10, so instead I've done a top 13 of my favourite Last of Us cutscene moments. So let's get on with it. So number 13 is I Need a Car cutscene, which takes place in Bill's town shortly after Bill saves you from all of the infected when you're hanging upside down. I picked this scene here because I like it because it's different to most of the others, as it's a more light-hearted cutscene. Plus, the introduction of this brand new character, Bill, is also a highlight of the game, mainly due to how Ellie just rubs him up the wrong way, and that is brilliantly shown here when she just smacks him round the arm with that lead pipe. His reaction to that is just priceless, and it always makes me laugh when I see it. And I think this voice actor who played Bill did a brilliant job with this character. He's not in the game that much, but he definitely leaves an impact. I also like this scene because it shows more of Joel and Ellie's blossoming relationship, as he's sort of slowly but surely becoming a father figure to her, and he sort of goes into that parent-dad mode here when he tries to get her to calm down and he tells her off for taking the piss out of Bill and things like that. So it's quite a good scene for that respect, and that is why that is my 13th favourite cutscene in The Last of Us.
Can't miss it.
Knock it off.
The 14th spot goes to the Weibringer here cutscene, which takes place in the Dam chapter. And here we see Joel and his brother Tommy reunited, as Joel tries to convince Tommy to take Ellie with him to the Fireflies. I like this cutscene because of the underlying tension between the two brothers. We don't really know what happened to Joel in the space of those 20 years from Sarah dying, but here we get a small glimpse of the sort of thing they did. We've seen before with Ellie, when he's talking to her, that he's done a lot of bad things, but Tommy just highlights that even more, and we sort of get the impression that while Tommy loves his brother Joel, he secretly resents him for all the shit that he had to go through in those early days of the outbreak. I also like the lines that the two brothers use, particularly when Joel says, "I bring you the cure from mankind, and you want to play the pissy little brother." I always quote that line, and it's just one of my favourite lines from the whole game, to be honest. But it's a really cool and intense scene. The He Was My Partner cutscene is my pick for number 11, and there's quite a few reasons why I like this scene. Mainly because of how it switches between comedy and drama quite easily. So the three characters have gone from the school at this point, and they're just seeking shelter in this house. And I love Bill's response when Joel asks him about what the next plan is, and Bill says that this was plan A, B, C, all the way to fucking Z. And I think that's such a brilliant line. It's one of those other ones that I quote quite a bit. And then there's a brilliant moment where, as they're arguing, Bill sees something in the room, and it cuts and shows you that someone is hanging up. When Joel asks Bill if he knows who it is, Bill replies that it's his partner. And you could take this in a variety of ways, that he's like his work partner or he's actually his lover. And I think it is supposed to be that it's his lover. So there's quite an emotional moment here where Bill is clearly upset, but he's also angry and frustrated with that person. They obviously had something where they sort of split up a bit, and he hadn't seen him for a while, and maybe he's angry that he took his own life. And when he points out all the bite marks on his body, you can just see the emotion on Bill's face there. And then Joel in the background, he doesn't really know what to say, but he can see that his friend's hurting and he feels bad. It's just a very well acted scene, and again, Bill, while not in the game for long, he definitely makes an impression through the comedy and also through this scene of the more seriousness to it.
Got some juice.
The Tell Me What to Do cutscene just makes the top 10, and it's mainly because of how amped up the story has gotten at this point in the game as you are playing. So this occurs at the end of the university chapter. At this point, Joel has gotten injured, and it's up to Ellie to get him out of the university to safety. So you play through this section and you manage to get him out, and you think you've saved the day, and then during this cutscene where you as a player are helpless, Joel just passes out, and it leaves you wondering if Joel has actually died. Then the game just skips right ahead to the winter chapter, and it's now clearly deep into winter as a lot of snow has fallen. So you're left wondering for a while as it shows you some of the lakeside, just what exactly has happened. And then you get this cutscene of this rabbit, which I think is just unintentionally hilarious. Just how it gets shot. I just wasn't expecting that. So we then see that Ellie is the one that shot the arrow. So we're now wondering, where the hell is Joel? And I just think it does a great job of building that suspense and not really answering the question and leaving it up to you. You then have to play the winter section for a while before you find out what actually has happened to Joel. And it's just a really fabulous scene in that respect. My number 9 pick is the Find Someone Else cutscene, which occurs right at the pretty much end of the game. So you have travelled through to Salt Lake City, and you've finally gotten near to the hospital, yet disaster has struck, and Ellie sort of almost drowns underground. So in this cutscene, we see a desperate troll desperately trying to resuscitate Ellie, and it's just so heart-wrenching because for me, I really clicked with Joel as a character, and I just wanted him to have a happy ending. And seeing him about to potentially lose another daughter-like figure was just heartbreaking at this point. Then when those military show up, you don't really know what's going on at that point. And when they knock Joel out, you're just left wondering what the hell's going to go on. Eventually, Joel wakes up in the hospital, and we find out that Marlene was responsible, and we find out that basically she's still alive and she managed to get there, and Ellie is now safe and well. So we're initially relieved that she's okay, but as the conversation between Marlene and Joel progresses, Joel learns that Ellie has been prepped for surgery, and that they're going to operate on her to try and find a cure for the disease. However, Joel realises that the fungus grows on the brain, so there's no choice but to operate and kill her in order to save mankind, basically. Joel, though, at this point, he's obviously seeing her as a daughter, so he's very much attached to her, and he doesn't want her to die after coming all this way with her and bonding with her this much. And you as a player sort of feel this as well, because you don't want that character to die because you're fond of her. So eventually Joel manages to be led out of the hospital, but before that he ends up taking out the guard that's with him. And let's spare a thought for that guy, because Jesus Christ, he gets such a brutal death. And you'll then set on your way to murder everyone and get Ellie.
I ain't got time for this. Where? Top floor, the far end.
The I'm Not Her cutscene makes the number 8 spot, and to be honest, this could rank even higher or further up on my list, as it's a really, really good cutscene. So at this point in the game, Ellie has ran off as Joel tries to get rid of her by passing her on to Tommy, because he's really attached to her at this point and he doesn't want to risk losing another person that he's close to, so he figures the best way is to not have that responsibility to look after her with him. Ellie, not really understanding why he's trying to get rid of her at this point, just runs away, and eventually Joel and Tommy track her down to this house, and it's here where they have a sort of heart-to-heart, and they sort of argue back and forth a bit, and Ellie says that she's not her, referring to Joel's daughter. And then they have this quite tense sort of standoff where Joel sort of looks at her for a bit after Ellie sort of berates him, saying that everyone she loves has either died or left her, everyone except him. And then he sort of just stares her down and just coldly says, you aren't my daughter, and I sure as hell ain't your dad, and we're going our separate ways. And it's just a real gut punch to Ellie. And you know, I know why Joel's doing it. It is like I said earlier, it's because he doesn't want to lose her. He doesn't want to get hurt again, because he's hurting that guy, and he's already been through so much, and this just seems like the best way, and he's lashing out, but he still loves her deeply, and it's just such a great back and forth between the two. It's a really good cutscene, this. So in at number 7 is the Bubye Dudes cutscene, which occurs at the end of the Bill's Town section of the game, after you've finally got that car working and you can go on your way to the Fireflies. So after saying a goodbye to Bill, we get some cool shots of Joel and Ellie on their little road trip, and it's a really fun couple of scenes where Ellie just acts like a kid would, kind of thing, and that's what I kind of like to see, as they're sort of doing their father-daughter thing here. So Ellie's stolen a few magazines from Bill, and she's got this gay porno magazine, and she cracks a joke with Joel, making him feel really awkward. So that was like a funny little bit that went on. She then gives him a cassette tape, and they listen to some music, and she's all kind of like buzzing and hyper at the minute, because she's got that adrenaline flowing after all the action that's just been going on in the game. And Joel realises that she probably should go get some sleep, and she's like doing that natural thing a kid does where they don't want to go to sleep and they say they're not tired, and then the game just brilliantly cuts to the same sort of shot in the car but at a different time period, and she's just fast asleep now. And it was just really nice seeing that. Eventually, as they're driving, they get to this dead end, and the road is blocked off, so they're forced to go down off the highway, down into the streets. And Joel, being what he is, he knows this is sort of a trap, but he goes down there anyway, and they see a guy in the road, and Ellie thinks that he's hurt, but Joel knows better, so he floors the car at him, because it's a trap by the hunters to kill people and take their stuff. Eventually, as the car speeds through them all, knocking a few over, the car gets taken out by a tram or a bus or something, and they crash into a shop, which eventually leads to a brilliant gameplay section. But this cutscene is just great. It's really cool, and I really like it. My number 6 choice is the You Can't Save Her cutscene, which shows Joel trying to flee the hospital with Ellie in his arms, as he wants to get away from Marlene and the Fireflies. Unfortunately, he is stopped in the car park by Marlene, who holds him at gunpoint, and she pleads with Joel to let her stay so that she can save basically the entire of mankind. It's a really well done, well shot, and well animated, and well acted cutscene, to be honest, and it's really tense as the two stand off against each other. It's made even better by how it jumps forward after a certain point, so you're not actually sure what's gone on, as it suddenly cuts to Joel in a car driving away, making you think that he's actually listened to Marlene and let her go. It then brilliantly hands on this deliberately long shot of just Joel driving, until you eventually start to hear someone in the back, and thankfully it's Ellie. She's safe and well, and for me as a player that was a huge relief, as I agreed with Joel. Fuck mankind, we need to save Ellie, man, she's like my daughter, yo. You know what I'm saying? So as the cutscene progresses, Ellie asks what happened, and it's here where Joel tells her a version of the events. However, you see the truth via some nice little flashbacks that occur every now and then, showing you that Joel actually just shoots Marlene in cold blood and then makes his escape that way. For me, Ellie's reaction says that she knows what he's saying is bullshit and something else happened. And when she turns away from him, it's kind of sad, and I think Joel knows that she's not buying it, but he tries to just play along. It then cuts back to the moment Joel shoots Marlene, and he loads Ellie into the car, and there's this brilliant moment where Marlene, now injured from her bullet wound, is on her knees begging for her life, and as Joel stands over her with a gun, he simply and coldly says, "You just come after her," and pulls the trigger. It's just absolutely brilliant. What a brilliant cutscene this was. Joel, you are such a fucking badass, mate. The By Any Means Necessary cutscene is my number 5 pick for best cutscene, and it involves Ellie and David in the winter section of the game. So at this point, Ellie has been locked up by David at their compound, and it's here that the two have this brilliant exchange. It's a quite sinister scene, to be honest, as you see a man getting chopped up for food, and the interaction between David and Ellie is also quite creepy and sinister. The David character is a highlight of the game, and he's played brilliantly by Nolan North. Not that you'd really recognise the voice, as he does a superb job. He's a really horrible human being, and you can clearly see that he's trying to befriend Ellie for some nefarious means. And as the scene progresses, you start to feel like Ellie may be eating up his bullshit, to be honest. And there's a sinister moment where he starts to hold her hand, and you realise that his intentions towards her are not honourable in the slightest. But brilliantly, in Ellie's character, you know that she's this smarter, wiser sort of young adult and not a naive kid. So she knows what he's doing and what he's trying to do. So she plays along for a moment, and as they're holding hands and he thinks that he's in there, she just violently snaps his finger and causing him a lot of pain. As he's been trying to get her name throughout this whole cutscene, she then just shouts out Ellie, and him in agony wondering what she's on about, she then replies in a brilliant way.
Ellie is the little girl that broke your fucking finger.
As a player, you feel like you've got one over on this character at that point, but then things take a more sinister turn as David just smiles, turns to you and says, "What did you say? Tiny little pieces? See you in the morning." So now you know as a player that Ellie is in grave danger because they're probably going to kill her at this point. But then the game brilliantly switches the cutscene to Joel, who has now finally woken up. And while he's clearly still hurt and he looks like absolute shit, he as a character is definitely determined and resolved to try and find where Ellie is because he's worried about her. And it also relates to you as the player. You know that Ellie's in trouble now, as the game has now created its first real sort of villain character, and you want to be Joel, and you want to get in there and kick that guy's ass and save Ellie before they turn her into food. So I think that works really well as a cutscene. My number 4 pick is the What Are You Scared Of cutscene, which involves Ellie, Joel, Henry and Sam. They just escape that house which is on that Sniper Alley section of the game, and they flee through the back gardens away from that horde of clickers that have just arrived. It then cuts to somewhere later on, you don't really know where, but they found some sanctuary and they're just having a nice chilled evening, eating food, having jokes and just sharing a nice time together and sort of bonding as a new group. It's a really lovely scene. There's some nice interaction between Henry and Joel, which haven't really got on along that much because they kind of clash as two leaders, but here they're getting along nicely. We then see Ellie go and check on young Sam, and they have a nice couple of exchanges together, though Sam is clearly worried about something and he's kind of reflecting on life in general. They have a nice sweet exchange, and Ellie pulls out the toy figure that he was told to leave behind in the toy shop earlier in the game, and it's a really sweet scene between them. And unfortunately it ends on a bittersweet note as it's revealed that Sam has got bitten. And while this was kind of obvious from a player's perspective, it's not from the characters, so it comes as a complete shock to them in the morning when Sam unfortunately has turned and he starts to attack Ellie. We then get a really powerful scene that follows this, as Joel attempts to save Ellie by shooting Sam, only to be stopped by Henry, who then takes out Sam, his own brother. We then finally get a final moment with Henry, and, well, I'll just let this play out because it speaks for itself, really. It's such a powerful and sad and beautiful scene.
You all right?
Oh my god.
Sam?
Oh no.
Sam? Henry? Ellie, stay there. Henry? What have you done? I'm gonna get that gun from you, okay? Oh, okay, easy. This is your fault. This is nobody's fault, Henry. It's all your fault! Henry! Henry, no!
Oh my god.
The I Believe Him cutscene is my third best cutscene in The Last of Us, as I think it really shows the ruthless nature of Joel. We've caught sort of glimpses throughout the game of what he was like in those 20 years after Sarah died, through the conversations with Tommy at the dam, and through conversations with Ellie, as well as seeing things that he sort of picks up on, like knowing that that ambush with the car was there. We sort of know that he's done these sort of things before, but we haven't really seen that side to him. Sure, we've killed as him, but he's still been this father-like figure, and he's still been a fairly nice bloke who has a joke and is just a bit stubborn. Yet it's here where we see what he's really capable of, as he would do anything to get Ellie back, and he brutally tortures 2 people in this house. Now, he's definitely been through a lot, and I would definitely do this myself to get Ellie back, because I really felt for Joel, and I really relate to him as a character. So I'm all for this, and this scene is just absolutely brutal. He gets the guy to tell him where they are on the map, and then he just brutally executes him in front of the other guy who's tied up to the radiator. As Joel walks over to the other guy by the radiator, he picks up a lead pole, and the guy tells him that he told him what he wanted, and he's not going to tell him anything now. And then Joel's brutal response is just excellent. It's so cold. He just tells him that's okay. I believed him, and then proceeds to just beat him to death. The scene then cuts to Ellie in that cell, as she's now being dragged out and put on the table, as they're going to just chop her up by this point. Ellie then bites David in the struggle, and as they're about to chop her arm off, Ellie screams out that she's infected. At first, the 2 characters don't believe her, but as she tells them to check her arm, they realise that she's got the bite marks and the infection fungus thing. David then panics, leaving Ellie the chance to grab the blade and slash the other guy's throat. And it's such a brutal scene, and it shows just Ellie's like survival instinct kicking in. And she's also another badass in the game at this point. And it's just a really great scene, both of them. The Just Go cutscene is my second favourite cutscene in the game, and I think it's absolutely amazing. It occurs as Joel, Tess and Ellie finally reach the Capitol building, only to find out that everyone is already being killed, so the mission is now sort of at a crisis point, as they don't really know what to do. Tess can be seen to be really panicky at this point, and you don't really know why, but as Joel tries to reason with her and say that this isn't them, it's revealed that she's actually been bitten, because she was actually hurt during the museum section of the game. An angry Joel is upset that she didn't tell him about it, but Tess remarks that the bite mark on her is already worse than the one that Ellie got 3 weeks ago, so this must be real, and it must be worth fighting for, and she pleads with Joel to actually take Ellie to his brother Tommy's, as he knows the Fireflies and can help them out. She and Joel have this weird relationship. You're not really sure if they're lovers, but there's clearly something there between the two. It's more than just work allies and friends. I think there is a bit of a love thing going on between them here, and she pleads with him to just do this for her, because he is clearly reluctant to have her on his own and be responsible for Ellie himself because of what happened with Sarah. And it's just a superbly acted scene, especially Tess herself. She knows she's going to die now, but she will still try and help the others escape. And as the military people finally catch up to them, she tells them both to just go, and she will try and hold them off and buy them some time. And there's this great shot when Joel walks away from her, leaving her standing there, and she just looks at them, and she just has that sort of look in her face where she knows this is it. This is the end. And she's clearly upset, she's clearly teary-eyed, and they do this brilliant animation on her face where she sort of takes this breath in, but you can tell she's like upset, so her lip sort of wobbles a bit. She's like, and it's just brilliant. I absolutely love it. It's such a great shot, and it was clearly the actress doing it, and they motion captured it, and it just works really well, because it's just such a brilliant scene. And Tess, like I said, has just done a brilliant job here, and I really felt for this character and wish she was in it more, because she was a brilliant actress, and it's such an awesome scene.
Drop your weapons and come out!
The 20 years later cutscene is my number one pick for the greatest cutscene moment in Last of Us, and we really couldn't have any other scene, could we? As this is the most pivotal scene in the entire game, and it's one that's actually quite hard to watch, to be honest. So Joel, Tommy and Sarah are making their way through the city trying to escape the outbreak. As Joel and Sarah run ahead of Tommy, they eventually get to the bridge where a soldier is waiting at a checkpoint. As Joel pleads with the soldier to let them through, the soldier gets some orders through his comms telling him to just kill anyone and not let anyone through. As Joel realises what's going on, he tries to turn away, but the soldier opens fire on them as they both then fall down a small hill. As the soldier is about to execute Joel, Tommy catches up with them and kills the soldier. We think then that they are saved. However, unfortunately, Sarah has been hit. And this is where the scene and the game itself just goes up a notch and becomes a god tier game, in my opinion. This is such a hugely powerful and moving scene, and I've said that a lot with a lot of the scenes from this game and a few of them in my list. However, this one really does tug at the heartstrings. Even if, like me, you don't actually have any kids, you can still relate to this scene and empathise with Joel, as it's just such a sad moment to see a parent lose their young child, especially in a situation like this. It is a beautifully acted scene and a really well animated one, and I have to say, the tears that drop down Sarah's face after she dies just gets me every time. This is a really emotional and sad scene, and what an opening to a game. I mean, this happens about 30 minutes into the game, and then the titles come up. I mean, Jesus, this is powerful stuff, and you just know when you're playing it that this is going to be a good game, and you are in for a brilliant journey. I love how the titles then come up after that explosive, moving scene, as it gives you time to reflect on what has just happened. You've just lost, basically. You've lost a child, and now these cutscenes go up, and the music kicks in, the brilliant score by Gustav Santalat, excuse the pronunciation of that, come up, and it gives you a couple of minutes of breather just to reflect on it and get your bearings. It then cuts to summer on a black screen, and Joel then wakes up, and it then comes up with a 20 years later text, and it's like, oh my god, so he survived on his own for that long. He then looks really old now, and he has a knock on the door, and it's Tess, and she explains to him about the weapons, and it sets up their journey, the beginning of their journey in the game, and where you'll pick up. But this whole scene is just absolutely amazing, especially the bits with Sarah, and it's just incredible. It's an incredible scene for an absolutely incredible game, and that is why that 20 years later cutscene is my number one pick for the greatest cutscene moment in The Last of Us. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and you might not agree with my list, and if you don't, that's okay. This is just my opinion in some of the scenes I've seen. I mean, props do go to the ending cutscene, but I didn't put it in the list because I felt that you can't have that ending without all of these cutscenes. You can't have all these scenes because the ending then wouldn't mean nothing. So that's why these are in the order ahead of that ending cutscene. But if you disagree, let me know in the comments below your picks for your favourite cutscenes in Last of Us. Thank you very much for watching Last of Us Month on Super Beanie-man Gaming, and I'll see you tomorrow for a new video.